So this is Operation. Clint tries to get an 18-foot snake out of a box for the first time. I don't think I've ever tried to do this by myself with a snake this big. We'll see how it goes. Hey, girl. Okay, can I borrow a little of you? Oh, you're a big snake.
So when the snake latches onto you...
Yeah, uncoil from the tail.
Uncoil from the tail.
Thank you.
Okay.
Much obliged.
You said tickle the tail.
Yeah,
Right?
just kind of give it a little tickle.
All right.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. Oh, crikey. Oh, looks like we got a little urate in there. Okay, we're getting close.
It's just on your person now.
I've had a good run. Whew. Gotcha. Crikey. Back to my seat. All right. Come here, girl. You are a very heavy snake. Come here. I'm looking like a pro, aren't I?
Noob.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, she's making a run for it.
There you go, girl. Oh, there you go. Piece of cake. Okay. You don't want to stick around for the bloopers. I have a feeling there will be many. Well, hi there. I'm here today with the largest snake we have ever had in our studio. Now, obviously, she didn't actually even fit in our regular studio, but we are here still in Clint's reptile room enjoying this incredible beast, which is a mainland reticulated python. Reticulated pythons are the longest snakes in the world. That doesn't mean they're the heaviest snakes in the world. That title is actually held by the green anaconda, which we have talked about before, though this particular reticulated python is even bigger and even heavier than the green anaconda we had in that video. Now, reticulated pythons technically aren't even the heaviest pythons. The verified record for the heaviest python is held by a Burmese python. And the reason that they're not the heaviest, despite being the longest, is because retics are built like big, long, skinny tree snakes. Now, a while back, I'm gonna get a workout today. This is cheaper than the gym now. A little while back, we made a video about why it is difficult for a snake to eat a person. Well, not this individual, but reticulated pythons are a snake that occasionally pulls it off. So, despite not being the heaviest snake in the world, they're still plenty big. And knowing that they're the longest and one of the heaviest snakes on the planet, and that they sometimes eat a person, it probably comes as no surprise that they're very popular as pets. And to be fair, dogs and house cats eat a lot more people than do giant snakes. So maybe the fact that they, on extremely rare occasions, manage to swallow somebody shouldn't be viewed as a deal breaker at all. These snakes are beautiful, interesting, intelligent, and highly interactive. Honestly, if they weren't so large, they'd be one of the best pet snakes you could possibly get. That said, they are so large, and they're often purchased by people that are not prepared for such a snake. So is it a good pet? And is the reticulated python the best pet snake for you? To help you figure that out, we are going to score the mainland reticulated python based on our 5 categories, which are handleability, care, hardiness, availability, and upfront costs. When it comes to handleability, we give the mainland retic a score of 2 out of 5. While they're young, you can pick them up. This is largely a tree snake. It's a lot like a baby carpet python that happens to be the size of an adult carpet python after a few months. They are likely to take a shot at you right when you open the enclosure, but for the most part, they're going to mellow out once they're removed from the enclosure. Tap training is a really good idea with a reticulated python. Now, by tap training, what I mean is that before you pick them up, you make a habit of just giving them a little bit of contact. And when they're all coiled up on top of themselves, you might actually need to do it with a different object. Just something to let them know that this isn't feeding time, because that's the reason they're going to bite you, is because they think they're being fed. But just something to let you know that no. Now it's time for handling. Because these snakes don't tend to attack people for any other reason generally, at least in captivity, other than they think they're being fed. So anything you can do to indicate to them that this is handling time and not feeding time, a very good idea. It's also extremely important to understand snake body language and to be paying a lot of attention to the body language of your snake. We actually have a whole video on avoiding bites and interpreting snake body language. This is an unbelievably important skill with a reticulated python, because learning how to avoid a strike from a reticulated python at this size, that could be life and death. As adults, handling obviously becomes a very different story. The personality of individuals is somewhat variable, and their temperament will depend to a very large degree on your expertise in working with snakes and how much effort you put into it. This snake, whose name is Purple, comes to us from our good friend Richard Bilbo. And honestly, I wouldn't want to make a video with very many retics this size, but I know I can trust his. And I actually want to take a moment right now to give him some time to talk to you.
These animals are big. You definitely need to socialize them. I've had all my animals I purchased as babies. So they have grown with me and I have grown with them through their entire lives. You definitely need to make sure that you handle them a lot and you're in it for the long term. This animal has an extremely long lifetime. I've heard some of them live over 50 years. So it's something that you definitely want to make a commitment to 100%. A lot of people, and me also, people say you definitely want to handle these with more than one person. Anything over 9, 10 feet, they say you should have 2 people. I know how to read my animals, and that comes with raising them from babies. You know how they react, you know when they're angry, and even then you can get nipped. Don't be afraid that, think that you're not going to get bit having these animals. They do bite. They've got an extremely strong food response. And there it comes with the responsibility of the people that are selling the animals to make sure that they vet their buyers when they're buying this animal. This animal is about 24 to 36 inches at birth. And its head is this big. And they're a beautiful animal when you buy them. But they can get this big at 10 years. So you definitely want to make sure that you're in it and are prepared to grow with this animal as its needs progress. Their needs are changing all the time. And it's a financial responsibility, and you've got to be prepared for it, for the life of the animal.
Thank you so much, Richard. That was really awesome, and I think we learned a lot. Adult reticulated pythons are less nervous than juveniles, but they're still pretty food motivated whenever that enclosure opens. These are just alert, intelligent, and fast snakes. And again, these can get to be over 20 feet long and can weigh over 200 pounds. This individual isn't even half that weight just yet. So imagine what this can be. If you ever get bitten by an adult reticulated python, you've got to know that at best you're going to have massive bleeding, lacerations, possible nerve damage. And if they coil you, which happens surprisingly rapidly with constrictors, and you're alone, they can easily overpower and kill you. But they probably won't be able to swallow you. So there's that. It's just not safe to interact with these snakes when you are alone. And honestly, when the snake gets much bigger than this, you're probably not going to be able to move it by yourself anyway. This is just a very dangerous animal. Snakes just get a lot more dangerous when they get to be over 10 or 12 feet. And to be fair, for as much as reticulated pythons have the capacity to kill somebody, you'd better believe that it's nationwide news whenever it happens. And how often does that happen? Dogs kill dozens of people in the United States every year. I can only find one recorded death in the US from a reticulated python. That said, It's plenty capable of killing a person. Wild specimens kill and sometimes eat people with actually some regularity. So definitely socialize your snake very well while it's young. Treat it with respect and take proper precautions whenever you interact with it. This is a pretty nice snake, like a blood python or a carpet python, but pretty nice with a snake this big just means that it probably won't kill you. But it will probably try from time to time if it thinks it's being fed. So be extremely careful, especially if there's any reason at all that the snake might think it's being fed. Last year for Mother's Day, we covered, well, the creature that has received the worst score we've ever given anything. And that is the human child. And the reality is, there are mothers and there are fathers in this world that have raised this terrible pet creature. And you're one of those. And if you're looking for some way to say, Dad, thank you, this Father's Day, might I recommend the Ridge wallet. I've been carrying one for it's got to be like close to a year now. Jason's been carrying one as well. Will has one, and they really, really are a very, very quality product. One of the things that I really like about them is they're shielded so that your cards stay safe and secure, not only from falling out of your pocket and stuff, but also from nefarious characters being able to steal your information. They're also guaranteed for life. That's a pretty rad deal. Anyway, these are great, and we'll have a discount code down in the description, just in case you want to do something nice for Dad this year to make up for that 0.6 that you were. And that gets us to care. When it comes to care, we give the reticulated python a score of 3 out of 5. Care would actually be very simple if they weren't so huge, but they are so huge. And that means that they need a huge enclosure. For a snake, this enclosure should favor floor space over vertical space, though if you've got perches large enough, they will climb some. A large enclosure like this can be relatively difficult to heat. You can use things like heat tape or heat pads, but it takes a lot. This is a really big enclosure for a really big snake. You're gonna need to keep the substrate clean, which is difficult. And actually, kind of scrolling back to handling for a second, man, these guys can drop some serious turds and a lot of urine. And so understand your cycling of your snake and when it might drop that on you, because man, that's a day changer. But should it happen in the enclosure, which is a much better place than, say, on you, they're gonna make a big mess. So make sure you have a lot of substrate and you're prepared to clean it up really quickly. You're gonna want a large, heavy water bowl. These snakes generally don't need to soak, so it doesn't need to be so big that it can fit in the water bowl, but it does need to be big enough and heavy enough that a snake with this kind of power isn't just gonna knock it over all the time. Maintaining the proper humidity can really be a pain in huge enclosures. So you're definitely gonna want to use something that is like PVC, or at least not made of glass and not with a screen lid, unless you live somewhere very humid. Now, feeding a snake this size or bigger is an enormous consideration. Mice and rats, those are gonna work as a baby, but soon you're gonna need at the very least very large rabbits, maybe chickens and lambs and stuff, so become good friends with a rancher. And remember, they might try to kill you during feeding time, so be very, very careful. I would not recommend ever feeding them when you are alone once they get over about 8 to 10 feet. Oh, and also bear this in mind, if it ever escapes from its enclosure, it'll be on the news. I'd like to take a moment to say thank you to Richard Bilbo, who made this video possible and who is just an all-around incredible guy, and to our patrons at Patreon, who actually get to see a lot more of Richard Bilbo, because every week we prepare an entire extra video. And this week's video has a lot of extra Richard Bilbo. And you gotta admit, he's like the coolest person any of us have ever met. So who doesn't want more Richard Bilbo? When it comes to hardiness, we give the reticulated python a score of 4 out of 5. These really should be extremely solid with proper care. Watch out for the symptoms of respiratory infections. We've actually got a video on that. And rubbing. Those can both be a major concern. So if they're pushing and rubbing, you'll see some signs of this. Either you'll see them pushing or you'll see them starting to damage some of their scales. Watch out for that. Dehydration is the easiest way to kill them. They do have an extremely robust body, so unless you're doing something really crazy, You shouldn't harm them with handling. Just don't like stomp on them or jump on them or fall on them. Anything you've seen in professional wrestling, don't do that to them. But sometimes it's going to feel like professional wrestling when you're handling them. Due to this robust body and generally slow metabolism, they can go a long time without food. Like a really, 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 really long time. Doesn't mean you need to do that to them on a regular basis, but they can. The temperature gradient for these guys is going to be very important, and again, in those big enclosures, it can be difficult to maintain it, but it matters. Oh, and last but not least, don't release this snake into the wild. That is a horrendous idea for so many reasons. When it comes to availability, we give the reticulated python a score of 4 out of 5. They are illegal in some places, so you're going to need to know your local laws. There are also occasionally bans on their transportation, like across state lines in the United States. Right now, that's not the case, but it's been the case before, and it could be again, especially the way things are going. So, support USARK. Pet shops sometimes have reticulated pythons. Expos, online, whenever they're legal to ship. Frankly, I think they're almost too easy to get. You know, if you want a reticulated python, it is not going to be difficult. Almost you can do it so fast that maybe you haven't considered, is this really what I want? I just kind of want to point something out about that for a second. There are a lot of animals that would be really, really cool to interact with for an afternoon. Maybe even like once a month. You would love to have the experience of interacting with a tiger or a giant snake. But when it comes to the realities of actually having one every day, maybe that's not really what you want. So keep that in mind if you're considering such a thing. When it comes to upfront costs, we give the reticulated python a score of 2 out of 5. The snake is what I would define as tragically cheap. I mean, so much so that, you will find these at an expo, and what it is a beautiful, reasonably sized, reasonably priced snake, and you think, why the heck not? Well, this is 10 years in. It's going to get bigger than this. One thing also to keep in mind when it comes to costs, you're going to need a series of enclosures, including a very large adult enclosure. You're going to need a heavy water bowl. Substrate, it could just be newspapers, but it could be a lot of other things. Newspapers are not particularly attractive. They don't absorb the copious amounts of urine that might get poured in there very well. And so there are better things, and you're going to need a lot of it. You could use a bucket load of Reptichip or aspen shavings. Whatever it is, it's going to be in the bucket load quantities, and make sure they're not ingesting it when they eat. The enclosure is going to be about as expensive as any snake enclosure you're going to get. Not like water monitor sort of expensive, but an expensive snake enclosure. You're going to need heat tape or a ginormous heat pad or like a radiant heat panel that the snake can't access. And, your food items, those could get pretty pricey. That's not even factored into our upfront costs, but, livestock. Oh, and your potential medical bills are also not factored into this category, but if you even take a bite from a retic this size, you're looking at some colossal lacerations, a ton of blood loss, so you might get a blood transfusion. Woohoo! You might get a blood transfusion. And, funeral expenses can be high. Though, again, they almost never kill a person, but they could. And this is why overall we give the reticulated python a score of 3.0 out of 5. Reticulated pythons are not a good choice for most keepers. Some people can handle it, but some people can also safely keep bears and tigers. If you have a reticulated python that is under 12 feet long, do not tell me that they're easy. That is not an unreasonable snake. But they get to be unreasonable for most people. Boas and larger carpet pythons get impressively large without being dangerous or almost insane to keep. This is a very dangerous and difficult to keep snake because of its size. That sounds cool, but when the wrong people get these snakes, it does harm to our entire hobby. If you get one, be responsible. If you're looking for a mainland reticulated python, contact Great Basin Serpentarium, and hopefully they'll be able to dissuade you from getting a mainland reticulated python. However, should you be the right person, that's the place to go. If you're watching this video to determine if a reticulated python is right for you, it isn't. But if everything about this snake sounds great except for the size, there are localities that stay very manageable. And we're going to have videos about those out very soon. So, as always, like and subscribe, and we hope to see you real soon. Getting a workout today. You don't want to stick around for the bloopers. I have a feeling there will be many, and they'll all be about the same. Okay. I might need a hand with her under the desk. I'm running out of arms.
Okay.
There we go.
I'm tagging
No.
you
I got her.
together.
I got her. Good girl. You
All
know,
regret go for the head.
you could just sit still. Which retics are not notorious for doing? Oh dear. Okay. All right, pull those pillows off too. We didn't like them anyway. They're overrated. Let's see which one of us wears out sooner. Needs a break. How about you? Huh?